It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
We're coming to the end of January of 2026. It's fastly approaching. It's amazing how months can fly by. And the Canadian Football League is still busy at work. And what we saw coming out of the CFL winter meetings was a lot of discussion points, but nothing really ratified. But here we go with the salary cap being pumped up to almost 6.3 million. It's a big boost of a couple of 100,000 over the previous year. And that in part is due to a $10 million revenue growth that the league saw in 2025, which is fantastic for the league.
It is. And we saw attendance numbers overall were up in 2025 from the previous season. Not a huge growth, but still enough to push things the right direction. Great news for the CFL. $200,000 per team, if you're not aware, is basically the contract of a pretty stellar player in a CFL contract. That's one of the top pay for defensive linemen, for wide receivers, those types of skill players in this league. So that's a very nice bump to see.
What the CFLPA is saying about this is great for the league. And of course, this ties into the revenue sharing formula that the two sides agreed to a few years back. And Solomon Elimimian has been really outspoken about what it can do. And he's finding it now that it is doing what they thought, that it's just not, in his words, not just a number, but an investment. That I think is huge for the overall health of the league too, is that if you can get revenue streams growing on one side, you can actually derive benefit for your membership on the other.
You can. And a nice boost to this is the timing of when this announcement was made. There was increased adjustments made to the salary cap last year. Some of the teams were well into their free agency negotiations at that point and felt it was late in coming. We're a week ahead of the negotiation window opening up for teams to negotiate with players not under that team's contract from 2025. This gives them time to prepare and to set themselves up to go after the players that they want.
Exactly. And the other nugget that isn't talked about too much is there's another $50,000 per team towards preseason compensation for the veterans that come into camp, which is kind of a nice little boost that helps with some of those costs that those players have to get through, especially when you're a veteran player and your team is setting up camp in another center. And let's say you're in Regina, but the camp is in Saskatoon. If you're in Toronto and you're at Guelph, things like that, you do have additional costs, and some extra money set aside for that is pretty nice as well. So overall, it's a win-win. It means the league is growing. I think from 2022 till last year, there's a number going around over $30 million over the 22 baseline, I guess you want to call it that the league has grown in its revenue streams.
When compared to other sports, $6.3 million for an entire team's salary cap does seem small. And it speaks to the challenges of the CFL in attracting top talent. Interestingly, when we had Howie Mooney on a couple of weeks ago talking about the 1981 CFL season, the Montreal Alouettes that year were a 3-win team, but had a salary payroll in excess of $4 million. So we're 45 years beyond that. And the salary cap is only $2 million above what the Alouettes were spending in 1981. This is a very interesting number to look at, especially when you start talking about single player salaries in the major sports in North America as well. But 6.3, it's not an insignificant amount of money. And I'm happy to see this continue to grow to pay the players more competitively when they can.
You throw it up against what the NFL can do, and yes, you will see that it doesn't make a dent in what they do, but no one in any league can do what the NFL can do at this point in time. Whether that remains sustainable for the NFL into the far-flung future, we'll see. They have to see if they can sustain this too, because they've set themselves to a very high revenue stream to keep this all going. Most of that driven by television, some of it driven by other ventures that they're into. The CFL is much more closely managed in that context, where expenses are significant and teams want to stick close to the bottom line in all of their goings on. In terms of financial certainty, they have to know what's happening, and having a salary cap bumped up to 6.280 is good for them, because now, as you mentioned, going into free agency, yes, there is more money. Maybe they could draw somebody that could help their team.
Something to keep an eye on over the next few months is the broadcast contract will be coming up for renewal for the CFL. And as you talk about the NFL being driven by the media rights, this is an opportunity for the CFL to cash in and look at some different streams of revenue for broadcasting. TSN has been the go-to for CFL football broadcasts for the last couple of decades. It's going to be open for competition now. When that last agreement was signed, very little live sport was being streamed on different platforms. So this may be an opportunity to see that salary cap continue to grow.
And TSN, of course, is flush with money because of Rogers' purchases of pro sports entities in the Toronto area. That came out of Bell's group of owned teams, I guess, if you want to call that. And so Bell, who owns TSN, has got some cash to float. And I mean, if you look at television ratings, they've been strong. In fact, they've been growing year after year. The package that TSN provides, it's all inclusive. And for them, that means that if you want to watch CFL, you've got to go to TSN, and that draws that audience to them. CFL by rights has to look at TSN first. They've been the partner for these last 21 years. They need to be the ones that you talk to first and see if you can strike a deal that makes sense to both sides. And then if that doesn't work out, then you open it up to other parties. And I'm sure Rogers will come looking as well and kick the tires and see if it's something that they want to do, because Rogers kind of has this view that they want to be the sports enterprise in Canada. The other thing to remember about this salary cap is that there are sort of different levels of triggering that go on. Now, the first that I mentioned was 2022, and the fact that they're over 30 million over that in terms of revenue streams. The next one is in the contract at 2025. If you go up again, 27 cents of every dollar is going to be allocated to the salary cap. So that's a known quantity that will be coming out. Teams can figure that out easily enough as to, if we know what the revenues were and what they were above, then we can certainly chart ourselves to expect this is what we're allowed to do. The union has also taken a portion of that money and applied it to direct forms of player compensation, including what they've done with this preseason allotment. So they've done those types of things too. This is all coming from 3 Down Nation. The cap itself, I know people will point at it and say, well, in hockey and baseball, but the money streams in baseball are starting to fall away. We'll see where baseball is in 5 years. I like the CFL's more pragmatic approach. You grow steadily, not necessarily exponentially, and then you can sustain the growth as you go forward.
It is smart business sense, and this is a league that does not generate the kind of money that the big major sports in North America do. It's a 9-team league. You have to be aware of the expenses, everything that's involved. And you're right, taking this approach does push things in the right direction without getting out of control spending that puts these teams in jeopardy. And we've seen the ebbs and flows of CFL salaries. In the 60s, it was comparable to what NFL players were making. In the late 80s, early 90s, there was this influx of trying to sign superstars, especially when you had the Bruce McNall, Wayne Gretzky, John Candy group with the Toronto Argonauts. They lured away Rocket Ishmael, who was a top NFL draft pick, to sign with the Argos. That was kind of the breaking point, I believe, in the CFL. It got to the point where the league and the boards of governors had to look at it and say, hey, this is not sustainable with our current format. We need to rein this in. And since then, they have put these caps in place. And as you said, they've continued to grow it when they can. The math does make sense. And this sets up well for the continuation of the CFL as a viable league.
I think back to something that Gary Stern said when he was the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, and they were talking about salary caps with him. And what Stern said at the time is that if everybody has a level monetary playing field, then it comes to skill of management and skill of coaching that separates the good from the poorer teams. And that is the point of having competition, is that it's not money that buys you championships, it's skill and acumen.
It is. And we look at the discrepancy. I know we've had this conversation shortly after the World Series wrapped up in Major League Baseball of the haves and the have-nots. And the Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series. Their payroll was 4 times that, or more than 4 times that, of some of the teams in the bottom quarter of Major League Baseball payrolls. That does not breed parity and competition. The CFL, it does. You have to be very smart about where you spend that money. And we'll get into some conversation a little bit later on in this episode about players that are now being cut loose that had multi-year contracts because the team needs to figure out where they want to invest that money. And these are there are pros and cons to it. And the pro is exactly the parity of the league. The cons is sometimes it does affect players and long-term ties with certain teams.
Yeah, you're right. Long-term contracts are tougher in a cap, especially when you don't have what they do in the NFL, where you can kind of mortgage that salary over the next couple of seasons if need be, so that you can keep somebody signed at a higher salary and maybe stay with a longer run. One other cap that we need to touch on, and that's the operations cap. And that's the cap that basically takes care of coaches and personnel staff. And that's the 25 people that are under that cap. Those numbers have been fought for a while. They were implemented back in 2018. It was a response to get spending reined in. And they basically hoped that by doing so, that they would then have a much more level playing field on that side of the equation as well. But it has created some different kinds of problems, especially when the pool, I would argue, isn't as big. And so you have to attract people. And if you want them to stay, you have to put money toward them, but it just isn't there.
This one is a tough one. There are definitely things that I can appreciate about this cap keeping expenses in check, if you will. The operations cap, though, I believe what it hinders is ingenuity. And because you don't have the coaching staff spread out to specific positions like you do in the NFL, you'll lose a little bit of that. And it makes it a lot harder where you've got a head coach that now has to also act as an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator instead of hiring somebody else to look after those roles. You lose a little bit in the specialty coaches of receiver coaches, backs coaches, those sorts of things as well. And it kind of paints teams into the corner as to how they can operate.
The other side of that equation, too, is when you have fewer people in the coaching ranks, you don't have the one-on-one time. You don't have that time to develop as you would, say, if the staff was 25 to 50% larger. And that comes down to positionals. And that's exactly what you were talking about. Receivers, coaches, linebacker coaches. We used to see it much more often. We don't see it so much now. It's more of a combination role. You think of quarterbacks and receivers. You think of, or defensive backs and linebackers especially. There's a dual role that comes through. And a lot of times special teams has another responsibility. It could be assistant head coach, as they do in Hamilton. Problem that people see is twofold with that. A, that there aren't enough positional coaches, and B, retention is very difficult because that cap is about $2.5 million. The head coach is making the lion's share of that. Offensive, defensive coordinator, again, make more than everybody else. So you start to see how when you get down to the lower positions, the money just really isn't there. Now, it's still decent money, but it's just not really, really strong.
And that's pretty clear when you see coaches in this league or former coaches in this league that are coaching at the high school level in the United States. That speaks volumes to maybe a bit of how out of control spending is in the US when it comes to football, but also how much teams are handcuffed here with that spending cap. And the organizations as it stands now are allowed 11 coaches and 14 other football operations staff. Those include GMs, scouts, equipment staff, video personnel, etc. So you can see 25 people within an organization, and there's a lot of nuances in professional football that could be better served by expanding that. I hope they can maybe at least increase this operations cap or figure out a way to get more people involved in coaching and evolving the CFL and the professional game.
It would be a nice aspirational way of going about this. And maybe it will come with the new television agreement. This is where they say, okay, we're going to be making X amount more. That should afford us to do. And maybe this is raise the cap from the 2.5 roughly that it is up until the 3s, maybe 3.5. And then you add 3 to 5 more coaches in that. Now you've got 14 to 16 coaches. Although if you can keep people, and this is what you want to be able to do, you want that ability to hang on to people and let them grow in the position. And if you afford more possibilities, then it's better.
Part of why this operations cap was brought into place was to avoid seeing mass exodus of a coaching staff that we saw between the Edmonton Elks and Saskatchewan Roughriders in the Chris Jones era, and to prevent teams from paying essentially multiple coaches that they've let go. I can understand the protectionism from that standpoint. I just think there maybe is a better way to manage it that doesn't see them limiting the number of jobs that a team can have in their office and in that development.
Well, the most recent example of a team that was really strapped under the situation were the Edmonton Elks. They had several people that they had let go all at once, and they were crushed by this. And part of the reason I think why Chris Jones was brought on board was because he could be immediately head coach, defensive coordinator, and GM, take over a lot of positions, and they could funnel a lot of that money to him, where the rest of the money that they didn't have, well, by him assuming so many different roles, they could make do with what they had. And it may have explained in part why that team suffered, because so much money was tied up with people that were no longer there for at least until 2024. Willie Jefferson, who recently has upped his tenure with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, publicly admitted that he was contemplating leaving Winnipeg because of their playoff the last 4 years.
It's fair. The results are there. Bombers won the Grey Cup in 19 and 21, got back to the big game 3 more times and couldn't get over the hump. A competitor like Willie Jefferson wants to win. And for as much as he loves the city of Winnipeg, he's moved his family there and settled in full time, his job is to win football games. The Bombers took a step back and the rest of the West caught up to them over the last couple of seasons. So you can certainly understand why he wanted to maybe look around a little bit more. At the end of the day, he did decide to come back. He's 35 years old, a 1-year extension through 2026 with the Bombers. He feels he still has a lot that he can bring to the team. That has to be proven now. He's made his comments. He's signed the contract. Let's see what that Bomber defense does in the coming season.
He is getting up to the upper echelon of most people in his position in terms of their career in football. I found it interesting that he would be open about this and discuss this. Most people, maybe after they've retired, would say, yeah, I thought about it. I think classically George Reed, who won it out of Saskatchewan after the 1975 season, a person that you think would never leave the Rough Riders, but he'd had enough and he wanted to move on. Nobody picked him up, and so he retired. If a guy like that can decide that this isn't a good fit anymore, then maybe anybody is like that. Willie Jefferson, yeah, he's a highly competitive person. He's extremely skilled in what he does, especially batting down passes. he's a force. You always have to account for him on the field. Now, granted, last year was not a great Willie Jefferson year. Still, when you mention the name, I don't think people dismiss him.
No, absolutely. And I think we need to take into consideration, he's made these comments about considering shopping around. That negotiation window wasn't open yet. He was still a Winnipeg Blue Bomber. He chose to re-sign with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So he did take his time and consider things, but he didn't even listen to other offers. So that does tell that as he thought through it, he did decide that Winnipeg was the place to be, not even entertaining what other teams might be throwing his way for a contract.
With about 200,000 speculated as what he's making for the 2026 season, it's about dollar for dollar what he made in 2025. So he didn't give up too much to stay with the team. We've talked about it on this podcast. Hey, if you stay with a team and they're playoff bound, you're going to make up money that you left on the table in the playoffs. It's significant for the Blue Bombers that he sticks around because he is so popular. He is a very magnetic person, draws a lot of people toward him. The Blue Bombers are getting older, and they're getting older faster than they're doing anything else. Will they retool? And this is what free agency may decide, or this is maybe where the draft really becomes vitally important for that football team.
There's been a lot of talk about the Bombers aging. I mean, if you look at it, though, Jake Thomas has retired and moved into coaching. They did let Chris Kolonkowski walk. They cut him loose early as well. Yes, they've got Willie Jefferson on defense. They've got Stanley Bryant, who is re-upped for another season on that offensive line, and they've got Zach Collaros. Those are three guys that you could definitely say are getting up there as far as those competitive years. Patty Neufeld also on the offensive line is maybe another one. I think sometimes people are too quick to label and saying this team is getting old. You look at that receiving core, Nick Dembski is the old veteran in his early 30s. Ontario Wilson, Carrick Wheatfall are both young guys up and coming that have shown a lot of promise. Kevin Sklercius is another guy, a draft pick from a couple of seasons ago on that receiving core. They did let Adam Bighill walk. They did let Brandon Alexander walk on the defense, some older guys. They've replaced them with Reddick Cramdy. Evan Holm has re-signed. He's a younger guy. Yes, they've got some aging core, but I think they're also putting some of those younger pieces in. And this is the way a team needs to evolve, as you can't just bring everybody back. I saw some comments today. The Hamilton Tiger Cats have cut Drew Wolotarski from the receiving core. Some Winnipeg fans were immediately hoping he was back. And if you want to talk about aging, bringing a guy back that you let walk who's often injured to a receiving core that you're trying to inject youth into isn't the way to go about it.
Hamilton giving up on him, pretty sure that it was injuries, that he just was not coming back from the injuries that he sustained late in 2024. If he does wind back up in Winnipeg, it wouldn't be a shock. He's a type of guy, I always looked at him as when Collaros had nowhere else to look, Wolotarski would always find an opening for him. Release valve down the field that could just knife a defense, but you never expect it would be coming from him.
He's kind of that fourth option receiver. And I want to say that I love watching Drew Wolotarski play football. I think he's great. They've got Jarrett Stearns that they had in 2025 that can kind of fill some of that role as well. As I said, Kevin Sklercius is a national receiver coming into his own. Could be somebody else that fills that role as well. And I don't know where somebody like Wolotarski would fit in coming back onto this receiving core when you've got some of these other guys fighting for space.
Chris Strevler musing about possibly having a return to football. After what he's been through the last two seasons, if you were his agent, what would you be advising him?
Well, you can't question his toughness and his heart. And you talk about a glue guy. I believe that's a lot of why the Bombers brought him back for a second run with the team. I don't know what he has left to give, and I don't know what teams are willing to give him that opportunity either. The only fit I could see is, and this is something that we discussed as maybe on the way out, but that specialized short yardage guy, he has had success. However, with two devastating knee injuries, a broken ankle in his past as well, does he have that drive and that power that you want in the short yardage situations? His touchdowns to interceptions in his career are negative. I just don't know what you could do with him as a quarterback at this point.
And I do fear for his future. He, as we've indicated, he's had 2 really bad knee injuries. The one that he suffered in the Labor Day rematch against Saskatchewan was horrific. The one last year was shocking. At some point, is it, as Danny Machocha once said, you may love football, but football may not love you. Is there a point at which Streveler has to say, look, I've got to be able to walk in 10 years, and maybe now's the time to cut my losses? The man loves the game. He absolutely, he's the same as McLeod Bethel Thompson. He wants to play football more than anything. Does that mean that you just say, hey, we'll get out of the way. You bring yourself to where you're safe. The doctors say you can play, and we'll welcome you.
As I said, who's the team that's going to welcome him? I don't know if Winnipeg goes down that road again. Maybe there's something coaching-wise that you can look at with Chris Streveler. We mentioned Jake Thomas earlier. Micah Johnson with the Saskatchewan Roughriders are 2 long-tenured players in the league that have now gone directly into coaching. I don't know Chris Streveler as an X's and O's guy. I haven't seen that from him, but maybe there's something in that front office that you can see him doing, keeping him involved with the organization, but just not in that on-field capacity.
Hi, I'm Dave Naylor, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble podcast.
The Montreal Alouettes announced today that they have released all-star receiver Austin Mack prior to an off-season roster bonus. This gives him that opportunity to now pursue other options. Austin Mack signed a 4-year contract extension in 2024. This is one of those issues I was talking about with hard to tie down a long-term contract for a player when they are this vulnerable to release.
Austin Mack's star has fallen since he got that contract. He did try to make it in the NFL with the Atlanta Falcons. That didn't work out. He came back, he got injured right away, and he hasn't been the Austin Mack that we saw when that contract was signed. He just isn't putting up the numbers, and especially with Davis Alexander, he's not looking to him as much as what they were before. I don't know that the Alouettes could see a way through, and especially he's going to make about $211 with a $45,000 bonus that was supposed to be paid to him on February 1st. And we've talked about this so much. It gets him out ahead of free agency. He's already out there and he's willing to sign. We'll talk about others that are available that way as well. But this, you think it's harsh because he doesn't get that money. But in the same breath, it also frees him to go somewhere and find something that maybe suits, and that a team that is looking and is needing an Austin Mack can now reach out to him without worrying about what the Alouettes have anything to say, because there's no trade value to it. It's straight up, if we want him, we can get him.
His numbers last year weren't terrible. 12 games played, 674 yards and 2 touchdowns.
But 12 games played, that's the issue. He's not there.
That was returning from the NFL opportunity.
Last year? It was 2024.
Okay. Production-wise, if you look at the stats, in 2023, when he had his breakout season, he played 17 games, 1,154 yards and 4 touchdowns, and he averaged 14.8 yards per catch. 2024, he averaged 14.5 yards per catch, and last year, 14 yards per catch. So when he is targeted, that production is still there. Now, whether it's a fit with Davis Alexander that has caused some of this, he's had some injuries in the past as well. But I think he will be a very sought-after receiver in free agency and should land with another team quite quickly.
I don't doubt that he'll be a player that somebody is going to tap and say, hey, we've got room for you. Would you like to come and join us? The Saskatchewan Roughriders may be that team because Dante Myers has got a futures contract with the Cincinnati Bengals. They have a need right now. He's only 28, so he's on the good side of 30. I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't picked up soon. And who knows, the Toronto Argonauts have been picking up castaways this last little while. Maybe the Argonauts will find out very soon, have signed Austin Mack.
And sometimes players just need a fresh look, a fresh start, new surroundings. And we're seeing also the Hamilton Tiger Cats and Tim White are parting ways. this is another guy. He's had a lot of success with the Ticats. He's had some issues with dropping the ball as well that maybe has weighed on him a little bit, but consistently 1,000-yard receiver. And those are not the most easy to come by. I imagine, much like Austin Mack, Tim White's phone is going to be ringing now that he's got that opportunity to get out ahead of the free agent window and see where he can land.
Tim White, 1,016 yards last year. That was the lowest total he's put out since 2021 when he was at 774, his first year in the league. White is one thing, if not this. He is durable. He plays all games every season. For any team that can find a receiver that is available every time out, that's massive. Yes, we've chronicled the fact that he's had some between the ear issues when it comes to receptions. And it seems to be in the first third of the season where he struggled mightily hanging onto the football. Once he gets his confidence back, then he goes off and he makes some great plays and can carry a team if need be. For Tim White, he's a little bit older. How does he fit into someone's plans? And I don't know that he can make in excess of 200,000 like he was with the Tiger Cats with somebody else. I think he's going to be more of a positional receiver, which means if you're going to sign him, you're not going to throw the big dollars at him. With Winnipeg fit for him?
That's a possibility. And you talked about the durability. He missed one game in 2021, a game in 22, a game in 23. Hasn't missed a game over the past 2 seasons. When he plays those full seasons, he's averaging 8 touchdowns per as well. That's production. That's what you like to see from these receivers. And going through the list, 3 Down Nation has put up their top 20 free agent receivers. There are some heavy hitters on this list. Again, I don't know how many top that $200,000 range, like you said, but there are some guys here that are going to be sought after. It's going to be competitive to land some of these receivers. Topping their list, Keyshawn Johnson of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. You mentioned Dante Myers pursuing NFL interests. This is the other key for the Riders to lock up, I think, is Keyshawn. And if not him, you start going through that list of the other 19, and there are some players there that can come in and produce right away.
Very true. The Keyshawn Johnson question mark for the Rough Riders is, has he come back from that knee injury that he suffered, and how far has he come back? He was a very reliable and solid receiver with that football team. And again, a guy that kind of worked his way through the system. Nobody knew him when he came to camp, started to get some playing time, and then made a name for himself. There's going to be a few Rough Riders, I think, especially after winning a Grey Cup, that are expecting to be paid. And if it isn't by the Rough Riders, somebody's going to do it. The Riders are going to do what they can to keep that unit together, but even they know there's going to be attrition.
Yeah, looking through this top 10 list, I'm going to throw some names at you really quick. We mentioned Keyshawn Johnson and Tim White. Number 3 on the list is the first national receiver, Curly Gittins Jr. with Edmonton. We talked about Austin Mack. You've got Dominic Rhymes with Calgary, Dijon Brissett with the Toronto Argonauts, Joel Robustelli, the next Saskatchewan Roughrider receiver looking for that contract. Dalton Schoen in Winnipeg is an interesting one. You talk about coming back from injury. Tommy Neild, also of the Riders, and Aiden Eberhardt with the BC Lions.
Well, we talked about Chris Streveler just a few minutes ago and whether or not you'd want him to come back and play given the knee injuries. And Dalton Schoen has never looked right since he got hurt. And last year, twice he went out with non-contact injuries. And the last one, of course, being against Calgary that finished him for the season. Dalton Schoen, maybe that career is over as well. You can't be on the bench and providing much in the way of touchdowns or receptions.
He's coming off back-to-back ACL tears over the past 2 seasons, not likely to be ready for training camp when it opens in a couple of months this year as well. So you're right. It's going to be a reclamation project for whoever wants to give Dalton Schoen that opportunity. It would probably be a very incentive-laden contract as well, based on games played, based on receptions and those kinds of numbers, as opposed to throwing the big number out for salary that Winnipeg did when he was previously a free agent.
Micah Awe is now looking for employment after playing last year with the British Columbia Lions. And of course, Awe is a stats monster. Last year, he led the CFL with 114 defensive tackles. It was the end of his fourth stint with BC. He's was there in 2017 and 18, back in 2022, now in 2025. He's doing the tour. He's becoming the new Wandering Glen, where he's also with the Argonauts, also with the Blue Bombers, also with the Red Blacks, the Alouettes, the Stampeders. He hasn't found the Elks or the Rough Riders yet.
Another big name, as you said, he's a stats monster and a very capable linebacker in the CFL. There are some, I do expect to see some movement in the linebacking position in free agency. We've seen some guys cut loose that were a bit of an eye opener as well. You talk about age and production, and this is a guy that I think's got a couple more years in him for sure that you want to see in the CFL. He's a game breaker when he is on.
Where does he wind up? And maybe this is where the Edmonton Elks come knocking. They've got a decent linebacking core, but a veteran leader out there would really be nice to have.
32 years old, and he's only got 2 more teams to sign with to get the complete Glenn.
And to be fair to Kevin Glenn, he did sign with all 9, but he didn't play for all 9.
One more receiver that is off of that list of potential free agents is Justin Hardy. He has re-upped with the Ottawa Red Blacks. 34-year-old receiver looking at about a $210,000 contract. He was really, alongside Khalil Pimpleton, the 2 bright spots, I would say, in that Red Blacks offense in 2025. So they're hoping to lean on that veteran presence and continue to push the Red Blacks up the standings.
When you look at Justin Hardy and you look at the last 3 seasons, he's missed 2 football games total and put up steady stats, over 1,000 yards a season, averaging about 5 touchdowns a season. He is a guy that also does a lot of the dirty work across the middle. He'll take a catch and he'll get you some extra yards. He's the type of body type that you love to have on the inside, and that's something that I'm sure that Ryan Dinwiddie is very excited to have him on that football team. Where the Ottawa Red Blacks really need to shore up is that offensive line. And I'm really curious to see what they do in free agency to address that and what they do through the draft. Because though they've drafted heavily with offensive line, they've not hit extremely well. Now, part of it is that they have to grow into the position. And part of it is they just missed.
They have. And offensive line is one of those toughest positions, I think, to find guys with staying power. You can have highly touted draft prospects that end up signing NFL futures contracts because, again, you've got 32 teams south of the border trying to find offensive line talent as well. So if you've got a top end, it doesn't matter the passport as much on offensive line as maybe some of the other positions. The NFL is going to come knocking. That can steal those guys away. So when you're drafting, it's the dilemma. Do we take the top guy or the top guy that's likely to land in the CFL? And what is his ceiling?
Exactly. That's a great point to make, because when we go into the Canadian Football League draft and look at what's going up on that board, there is that question mark. Do you take and wait the 2 to 3 years? The Argos have done that several times. Or do you take a chance like the Rough Riders have, draft somebody high up and see them in the NFL and never have a chance to bring them back? It's getting tougher and tougher because the money down in the United States is so huge with the NFL that eyes just light up if any NFL team shows an interest.
It's why nobody batted an eye with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers bringing back 40-year-old Stanley Bryant for another year. Yes, he's getting up there in age. Who's better to come and take away that position? If you don't have somebody that you feel that confidence in, you look to that veteran presence.
That's a great point as well. It's always a question for any coaching staff. If we're going to move on from someone, what do we have left to take that person's place? And if you don't have anything, then why are we moving on from that person? And Stanley Bryant is a classic example of that. Why not stick with him? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And he's the type of guy that is a huge asset to that offensive line, because not only is he, again, a glue guy, but he keeps the backside of the quarterback protected. And by backside, I mean his blind side. Zach Collaros doesn't worry about what's happening over his left shoulder.
And again, you talk about age. That's a quarterback that's getting up there in years, well past 35. He doesn't want to be spending a lot of time on his back. So when he's got confidence in a player like Stanley Bryant protecting that blind side, that helps Zach be successful. That helps him keep moving that offense and pushing the ball down the field.
Speaking of Blue Bombers, Danny McManus, at the time he was playing for the Calgary Stampeders, and he mentioned one thing that I thought was so apropos. He talked about help in the backfield, and he was talking about being a quarterback, and he said one thing about Wes Cates: anytime he was on the field, I never worried about my blind side.
We see that value in running backs 100%. For as much as you want a guy that's going to rattle off 5.5, 6 yards per carry, sometimes even more important value is that ability to protect the quarterback, pick up the blitz, get that extra guy that's coming in. And we see teams build success on that. AJ Ouellette, Brady Oliveira, two of the best blocking running backs in the CFL currently. You do see the value. And these are running backs that I mentioned that are also quite capable carrying the ball. But you see what they add to the team in that blocking capacity.
Ronnie Lancaster, when he was coaching the Hamilton Tiger Cats, made a point of stating repeatedly, the number one job of any running back is to protect the quarterback.
Third down.
We've talked about the operations cap with the Canadian Football League, and I don't believe the NFL has the same sort of thing. But where I'm getting to with this is in the CFL, you're allowed one mulligan. You can fire somebody and sort of amortize that cost, but you can do that once every 5 years. In the NFL, they don't worry about it so much. And this is maybe why Sean McDermott from the Buffalo Bills was fired after they had lost in overtime to Denver. A man who had led that team to 7 straight 10-win seasons and had a 98-50 winning record over his 9-year tenure. The only thing he didn't do was lead that team, as Marv Levy did, to a Super Bowl. Marv Levy never won, though, that Super Bowl.
That's a really tough look when you see the success that the Buffalo Bills have had in the Josh Allen at quarterback era. And he's been a big part of that in nurturing the young quarterback, getting him to be one of the best players in the league and delivering in the standings year after year. It's not his fault that Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the Kansas City Chiefs built a juggernaut in the AFC that they just couldn't get past. This was an opportunity this year with Kansas City taking a little bit of a step back. As you said, they lost a playoff game in overtime. It's as close as it can come. So it is a bit surprising. Does go to show that nobody's job is safe.
His only sin was not getting to the Super Bowl. And of course, in this season, 25-26 in the NFL, you didn't have Patrick Mahomes. You didn't have Lamar Jackson in the way. You didn't have the Bengals in the way. In fact, all the star quarterbacks in the AFC were kind of out of the way, and it was only Josh Allen and the Bills. Now, one thing to remember is that Josh Allen was injured the previous week. So he was going into that game in Denver hurt. It showed because he didn't have a great day at the office.
Just looking at some of his numbers in his tenure with the Bills, 9 seasons, he won 98 regular season games. So that's averaging almost 11 wins per season. They won 8 playoff games, but never made it to the Super Bowl. That does show success to me and that they are this close. I'm not sure anybody else coming in can push them over the top based on what they have done in this 9-year run. Another surprising one, Mike Tomlin stepped down from the Pittsburgh Steelers, the longest tenured coach in the NFL going into this season. And again, you talk about a team that's had success. He's won Super Bowls. He's had winning season after winning season, just couldn't quite get over the top. Now, is that a coaching issue? Is that a general manager roster building issue?
Well, their quarterbacking woes have been very, very dramatic since the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger. And when Roethlisberger's career was starting to go the other way, they didn't really have a succession plan in Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin never had a losing season all the years that he coached in Pittsburgh, but he also had an ownership group that was patient. Buffalo, The Pakula family, I don't think that they're an impatient lot, but they came into this midstream when they bought the team. And so they may have different viewpoints about where this team should have been as opposed to where they are. And it's the crazy thing of expectations. If you think you're a Super Bowl champion and you're not making it, that's a big, big burden to carry. If you're a team that's not expected to be there and you do make it, let's say the New England Patriots this year, then you're everyone's darling.
It's all about the windows. And we talk about how small that window of success can be. As much as we'll bring it back to the CFL, the Bombers made 5 straight Grey Cups. The results got progressively worse in those 5 Grey Cup championship games. Didn't quite make it over the hump in the last 3, especially the last one got completely away from them. How big is a window in the NFL when you've got those player salaries and those commitments? How much longer is Josh Allen going to be at that top peak as one of the best quarterbacks in professional football? The failure to win, unfortunately, cost the coach the job.
Let's put this on Josh Allen, though. If Sean McDermott is expendable, is Josh Allen expendable? Because he's the next cog in the machine that everyone would look at, especially if you're the ownership. Maybe we've got all the parts, but this guy can't bring us to the promised land. Is it a possibility that Josh Allen is on shakier ground now that Sean McDermott is out?
You know, it's hard to blame a quarterback that puts up 350 yards and 4 touchdowns if the other team puts up 5 touchdowns. You're not going to win the game. Is that the fault of the quarterback for putting up 28 points? Or is it the fault of the defense for letting the other team outscore them? Just looking quickly at his playoff games, 66.5% completion rate, 7.3 yards per attempt, 29 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Those are pretty decent playoff numbers. So I don't know if you can pin it on him. At the same time, teams have to look for that scapegoat. And sometimes, no matter how good you are, look at Tom Brady. His time ended in New England. People were talking about whether he was washed or not. He went on to Tampa Bay, led them to a Super Bowl.
Tom Brady picked his own time to leave. He walked into the owner's box and said, "It's been great," shook his hand, "but I think I need to go somewhere else," and left New England. In the case of Josh Allen, is he going to have that choice? We saw what Detroit did when they felt that they should be somewhere and weren't, and they traded Matthew Stafford, who had led them to places they hadn't been in a long time, and brought in Jared Goff, who had taken the Rams places. But since then, Goff and the company under Dan Campbell, they are exactly the same as the Buffalo Bills. They get to the playoffs, they have great regular seasons, and they don't win. Now, this year, they didn't make the playoffs. Dan Campbell is still coaching in Detroit. It's the long view versus the short view. Are we good enough to be there? And if we're not, and if we aren't good enough to be there, but this guy's bringing us higher to what we think.
Another team to look at in this kind of consideration is the Minnesota Vikings. Last year with Sam Darnold, second best team in the NFC. Unfortunately, they didn't win their division because of Detroit's record. So they came through the playoffs on the road, didn't win. JJ McCarthy was the QB of the future with a season-ending knee injury. They decided this year McCarthy's healthy. He's going to be our number 1 guy. They let Sam Darnold walk. Who's starting the Super Bowl for the Seattle Seahawks? Sam Darnold.
Seattle's gain is Minnesota's loss. Minnesota has struggled with quarterbacks over the last 10 years as well, trying to figure out who is the guy that's supposed to lead them. And Sam Darnold, I mean, to be fair to him, nobody from the NFC Central last year won a playoff game. This year that changed, but that's because of Chicago.
It just goes to show you can have all the pieces to the puzzle, but if they don't fit together perfectly, those results don't come.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.